He made Thriller.
Lord of the Rings Online, a free-to-play MMORPG set in the world of J.R.R. Tolkien's fantasy epic world of Middle-earth. Released during the golden age of MMORPGs on April 24th, 2007, Lord of the Rings Online, otherwise known as LOTRO, has been trucking for nearly 20 years. Cashing in on the popularity explosion the films had in the early 2000s, LOTRO released to very positive reviews, and if you ask most players today, they would argue that this MMORPG is a sleeper hit in today's environment. Obviously, with its age, it's been ignored, but on my channel, we don't ignore games like this. No siree. So over the course of a week or so, I've spent a decent amount of time playing LOTRO and learning the game. So is it worth checking out? Let's talk about it. So, full disclosure, I am not a Lord of the Rings scholar, so I have no clue what the deep lore of Middle-earth is, or where to even begin explaining its world, but I can at least give a small summarization of when LOTRO takes place. Essentially, the story intertwines with the books, starting sometime after Frodo leaves the Shire. Depending on your racial choice, you start in different cities, where you will eventually meet Aragorn and Gandalf. Further content will have you meeting other major characters in the story, essentially allowing you to play out the book to an extent with your very own character. Speaking of character creation, LOTRO's character creation presents a decent amount of choices. Race-wise, you can play as the politically incorrect man, the high elf, dwarves, a sub-race of dwarves called the Stout Axe, hobbits, normal elves, and a human-looking shape-shifting race called the Bjorning. Each race has passive perks and weaknesses that ties to the game's story. It's a really neat way of adding a small detail of world building even in your character's racial choices. Class-wise, LOTRO has some pretty unique choices here. Each class is based off of a character from Middle-earth, another neat touch. Starting from the top, we have Bjornings, burglars, brawlers, captains, champions, guardians, hunters, lore masters, minstrels, runekeepers, and wardens.
And my axe.
Now, some of the names are probably confusing if you are an MMO veteran, but each class does more or less fit the description of standard classes. For instance, your burglar is the rogue of this game, and captains are the paladin. The warden, however, is probably the most unique class, so if you are looking for something a little different, give the wardens a try. Once you've chosen your race and class, you can then customize your look. In terms of options, it's obviously dated here, with no sliders or anything like that. The origin really only determines a title you start with, but once you're satisfied with your look, you can then choose a name and jump into Middle-earth. The tutorial you play changes based on the race you choose. For instance, if you choose the race of men, you play out a prison breakout where you are saved by Strider, aka Aragorn. The tutorial pretty much teaches you everything you need to know, including combat, movement, UI, questing, etc. Once you complete the tutorial, you are thrusted into one of the starting quest hubs. From here, the main gameplay loop will largely be questing, which can be a bit of a slog since pretty much all the quests are incredibly repetitive. All the normal collect X, kill Y, talk to Z quest types that you will see in every MMORPG is here.
Getting kind of bored.
But to be fair, LOTRO is a classic MMORPG, so it's to be expected. Around level 20, you will get access to the dungeons and skirmishes using the looking for group feature. I wish I could say a lot about the dungeons, but unfortunately there was a bit of a snag whenever I tried to get into one. Either the dungeon was too difficult to new players like me, who were playing them for the first time, or there just wasn't enough people in the group finder looking to run the same dungeon. Luckily, all the dungeons do scale to practically any level above the level you unlock them, so it is possible to go back at a higher level and experience them, which is most likely what most players will do, considering many of the dungeons require at least a decent level of group synergy or knowledge of the dungeon to complete it. Otherwise, get used to the death screen and the gear durability penalties from reviving. Other activities include player-owned housing, crafting, a weird form of PvP called monster play, and deed hunting. The player-owned housing system of Lotro is very similar to Final Fantasy XIV's housing system. Each player can purchase a house that is separated into instances of varying locales in each major questing area. Certain items can be used to decorate your home like other MMOs. You can also see other player creations within the housing districts, as long as you have the permission to go into them. Guilds, otherwise known as kinships in Lotro, also have their own house that players can have access to that can serve as another place for guild members to hang out. The player-owned housing system isn't as robust as other games, but it does have a surprising amount of depth for a 2-decade-old game. Crafting is pretty standard here with nothing too unique other than how you can customize your crafting choices. You choose a vocation from the start, which grants you a set of 3 professions. The vocations are Armorer, Armsman, Explorer, Historian, Tinker, Woodsman, and Yeoman. Each vocation mixes and matches the 10 available professions. The professions are Cook, Farmer, Forester, Jeweler, Metalsmith, Prospector, Scholar, Tailor, Weaponsmith, and Woodworker. Crafting from there just boils down to using a gathering profession to then craft whatever available items you have. Certain classes benefit more from specific crafting professions, but it's not overly necessary to min-max here, since you can just create alternate characters to cover anything you could be missing. The monster play feature in this game is Lotro's form of PvP. So simply put, there is no traditional PvP in Lotro.
Man, that sucks!
Lotro has a sort of arcade-style PvP where players can play as monsters or their character within restricted maps. On these maps, you have separate progression that only applies in this area. So while it's not competitive PvP systems with arenas or battlegrounds, I can say it's at least a unique spin on PvP. Unfortunately, there isn't really much incentive to participate in it, and for the most part, I didn't see anyone in the community bothering with it. So unless you can get a group of friends to join you in monster play, it's easily ignorable. But keep in mind, if you do want to PvP, this is the only way to actually fight other players. The last activities you can chase are deeds, which are just basically this game's achievements. Deeds can be simple tasks, such as killing a certain amount of enemies or exploring certain areas on the maps. Others are a little more involved, but you get the gist. These sound pretty lackluster, but trust me, deeds are actually one of the game's best reward systems. Deeds can reward you titles, mounts, reputation, permanent upgrades, and probably the best thing, which is cash shop currency. Yeah, you heard me. Lotro is a free-to-play MMORPG that rewards you with cash shop currency for simply playing the game. Now, the currency rewarded for completing deeds is pretty minuscule, only rewarding 5 to 10 points in most tasks, but they quickly add up, and you can create multiple characters to farm deeds with. In the 40 or so hours I played Lotro, I earned about 500 cash shop currency, which is about $8 worth of that premium currency. It's a very generous system in place that encourages players to simply keep playing to earn cosmetics or other goodies that can help progression.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Progression has quite a few systems in Lotro, but obviously things start with your level in gear. Max level in Lotro in the current expansion is a staggering 140. Much like other MMORPGs that employ a talent tree system, every couple levels you'll get a talent point that can be spent in various unique class archetypes. Each class has 3 trees to mix and match points into for various perks. In addition to talent trees, further customization comes in the virtues and also racial perks. Beyond the passives that character creation describes, each race also unlocks additional racial benefits that can be equipped and swapped out. Virtues is another system of passive stat boosts that can be equipped. Virtues, however, aren't just equipped, they also have to be leveled to gain their maximum benefits. There is quite a number of different virtues to choose from, with each one specifically raising stats that can further customize your class build, like giving yourself more health for survivability or higher higher critical chance for better DPS. Along with the systems of progression, unique and fun loot drops that can be found on enemies, loot that can be rewarded via dungeons, and then questing and crafting, there are quite a few ways to build your character to your liking. Obviously, there are min-max builds that exist out there if you want to follow guides, but the fact that there are options to outfit your character for different stats is a welcome addition. All in all, for the amount of content Lotro has from the journey from early game to end game, there is a lot to experience here, but ultimately for some players, what is the end game like?
We're in the end game now.
He said it! He said it!
Lotro has raids, difficulty scaling instances, daily quests, and then the legendary item system. Legendary gear is items you obtain that grow with your character once you've obtained them. You will spend time putting resources into these items, further growing its power, but only 2 can be equipped at one time. Raiding in Lotro can unlock as early as level 20, but you most likely won't really experience any high-level instances until the true endgame, which is at level 140. Raid groups can go as high as 24 players, and from what I've seen from the raiding, it has its merits, but the community has voiced differing opinions on the quality of raids introduced in recent expansions. But the main thing to remember on classic MMORPGs here is the journey to max level rather than the endgame content. Is that journey going to be worth experiencing? Well, for this game, it depends on your current tastes in MMOs. Lotro is definitely a classic MMO experience with a lot of quest grinding and repetitive content, but if you like the Lord of the Ring franchise and older style MMORPG pacing, you'll love what this game has to offer. The cash shop and overall monetization of the game is also very friendly as well, only having a few arguably pay-to-win items on the cash shop that even at its worst can be straight up earned through the deed system. Things like inventory space are really the only frustrations you may run into as a free-to-play player, so if you are looking to spend a little money, I recommend trying the subscription first to get a bigger inventory, among other benefits, and then down the road, if you really dive into the game, maybe purchase the expansions or some of the available cosmetics to support the game. The community is also incredibly welcoming to new players, so honestly, for a free-to-play game, there is very little to lose to at least try Lotro out and see if it's for you. Well, let's get to my overall summarization before this video gets too long. Lord of the Rings Online is honestly one of the best video game adaptations of the world of Middle-earth. There is so much to explore and experience in terms of this crafted fantasy realm, so if you are a fan of the franchise, then this is a no-brainer. Since the game is nearly 2 decades old at this point, new players have 2 decades worth of content to experience. There is an incredible amount of questing, dungeons, side content, and world to explore, and the best part? Almost all of it is free to play, with a lot of it being free to earn. For how old the game is, it has a surprising amount of players still roaming Middle-earth, with a lot of the community being very friendly. It took no time at all for me to find a kinship to join, with friendly players who taught me a bit about the game. Lastly, the game still has a relatively bright future ahead of it, with the developers still actively supporting the game, which means even if you dive in now, you will still have more to look forward to for years to come. Obviously, with age, the game doesn't have the best graphics or animations anymore, being so old. There is hopes from the player base that Standing Stone Games will greenlight a graphical overhaul or at least remastered textures, but no such thing has been announced. For such an old game, you would think it probably runs incredibly smoothly, right? Well, I mean, for the most part it does, performance-wise, but man, do the servers really feel like dog shit sometimes. There is a major issue when playing at times with network lag. It's terrible sometimes, taking as much as half a minute or so for the server to respond to something you are trying to do. It can absolutely ruin dungeon experiences or even solo play when it gets bad enough. The developers are aware that this is an issue and are trying to alleviate the problem, but as of this video, it's something you will have to get used to if you play. Unfortunately, like many of the games I cover on this channel, PvP is not a big feature in Lotro. Sure, there is PvP in the Monster Place system, but it's not a true PvP feature where you can queue up for battlegrounds or arenas. Maybe sometime in the future they will revamp how PvP works in Lotro, but for now, it's mostly an afterthought. For as much content as Lotro offers, the classic style approach of this MMO really does show its age. Most zones you will play through will literally just have you on autopilot, going from quest to quest, quest. Dungeons shake up things enough to keep interest, but the game could definitely use some modernization in its gameplay loop. And finally, the cash shop. Yes, the game has a fairly generous system where you can earn cash shop currency, but it doesn't change the fact that there is items here that can be seen as pay to win. Things like skipping progression, boosters, and permanent upgrades are here, and while yes, you can earn them, you can also just pay money to get it instantly. Luckily, much of this is ignorable for those just willing to play the game, but it is worth mentioning. Many of us grew up with Lord of the Rings, and it seems odd to think that many of us who did probably never played this game. Hopefully after this video you have a more informed stance on whether or not this game is for you. If this video helped you, please comment down below on if you plan to give Lotro a try, or if you are already playing it. Subscribe to my channel to watch and support more of my content, like the video to defeat Sauron and destroy the ring, follow my social media down below if you'd like, and here's one last message from Middle-earth.
Let Hansed Deun Quagmandir.
Denna den re dun hebeldeath mithrandir ve on hel hesano.